Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the afternoon session, the final session of this conference workshop. We are now at the workshop on writing the heritage research proposal, and I have the pleasure to introduce our lecturer facilitator. I'm Dr. Fernando Santiago, the director of the Southeast Asia Research Center and Hub. Now, the lecturer facilitator has spoken in various international conferences, has gained recognition for her work from leading international bodies in her field, and has published both locally and internationally. Recent publications include articles on politics and performance in the journals Theatre Research International and Performance Research, and essays in the books Thinking Through Theatre and Performance by Methuen Drama and the Routledge Companion to Theatre and Politics. Her international work includes being the vice president of the Performance Studies International and an associate editor of performance research of Routledge Journal of the Performing Arts. In the Philippines, she was head of the National Committee on Dramatic Arts of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts in 2014 to 2016, and is serving again as a member of the Executive Council of this committee for 2020 to 2022. She was founding chair of the NCCA Research Program Technical Working Group from 2016 to 2020. Uh, and, and she initiated she initiated and is now general editor of the forthcoming NCCA Research Journal. At DLSU, she has served as chair of the literature department and the dean of the College of Liberal Arts. So without much further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Jazmin B. Llana.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Okay, nag-share screen muna ako. Right. Can you see it? Okay ba?
Yes.
All right, great. All right. Nako, this is the last session of a very enriching, very exciting, very passionate conference. And you've heard all of the speakers. They are so passionate about their work, about the research that they've been doing. And I'm sure that we've benefited a lot from the session since yesterday. The workshop today, well, it's called the workshop, but there are actually two parts to it. One is a sharing. I wouldn't call it a lecture, but a sharing of what I've done to prepare for this session. And the other part is a workshop. Now, the workshop part, however, is going to be very limited. No, we are still trying to see how to do a workshop fully online, no, because we know workshops to be this interactive person-to-person exchange of ideas. But here we will try to do something that will probably deserve to be called a workshop. And I hope you bear with me, with us in doing this. And hopefully we will have an opportunity to really interact, in this session. You've been silent. Most of you have been silent all along since yesterday, but this session is supposed to be a chance for everyone to have an opportunity to speak and to share what you have been doing, what you're doing, what you are interested in, how you might engage in cultural heritage research. Okay, siya. So, this is the aim of the workshop, to provide information about possible funding opportunities, although that's going to be very limited because I am going to focus on the NCCA grants and awards, no? So for heritage research, and also walk you through the basic steps in preparing a research proposal. And that too is going to be focused on preparing the research proposal application for the NCCA grant. Now, because, if we spread ourselves too thinly, we might not be able to cover anything. But this one is a very practical aim, and that is, I hope that you're going to submit proposals for this year's round of applications for the NCCA grants and awards for research. The call is already out, and I'll show a slide on that call later on in the discussion. Now, at the end of the workshop, I hope you can produce a draft outline or abstract of a heritage research project. Of course, there's no way for us to assess you whether this learning outcome is going to come true to be realized. But I hope that you'll be able to do this and in that way benefit from the session today and the whole conference, because this by way of sort of harvesting, from the sessions from yesterday, and trying to see how we can do something, within our own practice, how we can advocate, how we can do research, how we can do heritage work as someone who is involved in whatever practice you are involved in. Okay? Right. So this is going to be our flow. There'll be a bit of a talk on heritage research, drawing from a lot of the things that have been said in the conference. And then the funding opportunities are sort of integrated into that talk. And then I'll focus on the NCCA research program. And after that, the workshop. I hope that the first three can be covered in 1 hour and a half at most, so that we'll have time for the interaction. Right. Now, at this point, it would be good to know who we are in this room together. I would like to ask Dr. Fernando Santiago to share with us the result of the poll that has been posted for you to answer.
Okay, so let me just read out the result of our lunch break poll. And we had 26 participants who stayed during the break, and 22 out of the 26 responded. The question was, do you identify as an undergraduate student, a graduate student, a researcher, a teacher, a heritage professional, or a heritage advocate? 18% are graduate students, 45% teachers, 9% heritage advocates, and 27% researchers. That was the result of the poll.
Oh, no graduate students here among us?
18% are graduate students. There are
There
no
are no.
undergrad. Well, at least during the lunch break, when there were significantly fewer people, there were no undergraduates and no heritage professionals.
Okay. Uh,
So it's 18% graduate
all
students,
right.
45% teachers, 9% heritage advocates, and 27%
27% research.
researchers.
Okay, so the overwhelming majority are teachers. All right, and I suppose you are teachers of heritage, but also of other or in other areas, in the arts and humanities, in the sciences, and so on. So welcome to this workshop, and we hope to benefit from what you're going to share from your area of practice. Thank you. I identify myself also as an advocate, but also I'm a researcher and I'm also a teacher. But before we move on to the discussion, I would like to say, well, three things. First, I'm not really into, I'm not a specialist on heritage. My area is theater and performance. There is a wide overlap of those two, but the focus of my research area is not really heritage. So I'm not a heritage expert. I hope that that will sort of lay down, where I'm coming from. And I hope that can somehow have benefit in terms of me being a facilitator of the workshop and not as an expert. Now, the next one is that I had the opportunity to initiate the NCCA research program, which was started in 2016 and led efforts in its development and implementation. I was chair of the committee since 2017 when it was set up, and now the current chair is Dr. Vicente Handa, who was with me during the first committee. And Dr. Handa then has familiarity with the program because he was part of the development of some of its aspects, no, in the first years of implementation. And I know that many of you here are also or have been invited into or to become part of the panel of experts that evaluated proposals. So some of you may be familiar with the NCCA research program. There is a research journal that is going to be forthcoming. It has been forthcoming for some time. We've been working on it, but we have postponed release of the first issue, which is actually already ready for release, but we have decided to postpone release because we are arranging for it to be a fully online, open access journal. The pandemic has actually uh, uh, added to the necessity of making it fully online. Okay, so that's my end of this discussion. I hope that I'll be able to somehow help in this wonderful initiative uh, of the group by Dr. Shirley Lua and her collaborators in the RPW team on Rethinking Heritage. All right, so the first part is on heritage research. We'll try to cover these four things. The question of what is heritage research. I know that you have lots of answers to this already. A little focus on intangible heritage, and then paradigms in heritage research and key research areas. As I was saying earlier, we will try to harvest from the beautiful discussions in the sessions from yesterday. These are not in any order, but the discussion attempts to cover the topics in order to provide a context for locating the writing of proposals. I suppose this is also my way of advocating for the kind of curiosity and criticality I feel is needed by a researcher on cultural heritage at this time. Of course, this is also to focus on the challenges of doing research. You would have already learned so much, as I was saying, from the preceding sessions. The answer to the question, what is heritage, seems simple enough. But how do we get a substantive answer that will not just repeat the terms in the question and thus give us nothing? I did a survey of possible sources of answers first here in the Philippines and then in the international scene. In the course of going through each one of these slides, we will have an idea what kind of heritage research is going on, the key research areas, what research projects are supported by various institutions, and the shifting paradigms of heritage research. I have to warn you, the slides are text heavy because I prepared this with the intention of giving you a copy for the workshop part of the session. You don't have to read now, just stay with me as we discuss. Each slide also has a hyperlink to the website sources, and we can try out some of them as we go along. Why is it not moving? Right. So let's begin with the NCCA. It's a good place to start because much of the heritage research going on in the Philippines is initiated, supervised, or supported by the NCCA. Also because I will end this brief talk with a discussion of the NCCA research program. Now, looking at the slide, what we have here, this is a description actually of the mandate of the NCCA Subcommission on Cultural Heritage. And part of their mandate is to support research. No? So you can see that on the highlighted parts. Encourage and support the study, recognition, preservation of endangered human cultural resources such as weavers, chanters, dancers, other craftsmen, as well as the conservation and development of artistic, linguistic, occupational skills that are threatened with extinction. So let's try to remember all of those terms, keywords like conservation, and then the threat of extinction. The other thing here is that the subcommission is mandated to encourage and support scholarly research into and documentation of Philippine cultural traditions, arts and crafts, as well as significant cultural movements, achievements, and personalities, especially in the literary, visual, and performing arts, and in mass media, as well as the various aspects of Filipino culture. Now, other than these two, however, you will see, if you look at all of those items in the mandate, you would see that all of them actually, each one of them actually has something to do with doing research, no? And you will see that many of them have to do with research. Number 8, for example, encourage, support, and systematize the audiovisual documentation of Filipino cultural expressions in the contemporary period. Documentation by itself is research work. Right. In the last session, you heard Dr. Cerudo talk about the Philippine Heritage Law and the beautiful things about it, and also the limitations. No, the NCCA Subcommission on the Arts, or rather on Cultural Heritage, actively worked in drafting and then passing into law the Philippine Cultural Heritage Act. Sorry, excuse me. And in the Philippines, this is our definitive resource for good or bad, for understanding the official state perspective on cultural heritage. So it's worth looking at. And on the slide, you can see that I put there, mainly this is coming from the NCCA website now about the Philippine Heritage Law. One of the major provisions is the registration and conservation of cultural property and national inventory of intangible cultural heritage. So let's mark that. And then in other provisions, there is a redefinition of cultural properties to encompass tangible and intangible properties. I would like us to note that this is a redefinition, which means there was a time when cultural property or cultural heritage was primarily, if not exclusively, focused on the tangible. And then the last item here on the other provisions is the sustaining of local culture studies in formal, non-formal, and informal education, which I think is a very good thing. We are an archipelago. The country has multiple cultures. We are multicultural, and there are many local cultures that have to be taken into consideration. And we can probably say that the Philippine Heritage Law somehow already reflects some of the developments, no, the major developments in heritage work, no, from UNESCO. In fact, that's the UNESCO documents, UNESCO conventions on heritage have been or were the basis for the crafting of the Philippine Heritage Law. Now, on this next slide, you see the Heritage Law brochure also of the NCCA, and it is downloadable on the website of NCCA. So right off, it answers the question, what is cultural heritage? And I would like us to pay attention to the way that it is defined, no, in law, that cultural heritage refers to the totality of cultural property preserved and developed through time and passed on to posterity, developed through time and passed on to prosperity. And there might be some questions already in your mind about, how those that do not fall within such a definition, might be considered in terms of cultural heritage. Are they part of heritage? Are they not? And so on. Now, cultural property, which is in the definition of cultural heritage, kasi cultural property equals cultural heritage equals cultural property. Ganun yun in this definition, hindi ba? And so it's worth looking at ano ba yung cultural property. And this refers to all products of human creativity by which a people and a nation reveal their identity, whether public or privately owned, movable or immovable, tangible and intangible. Okay. What is to be noted here? I would say that the point about whether it's public or private, should be noted. And also that here, from the idea of tangible and intangible, we now have the idea of movable and immovable, movable and immovable. Right. Now, the NCCA has a committee called the NCCA Intangible Heritage Committee that undertakes the inventory of Philippine forms of intangible heritage and the safeguarding of these. And they have come up with 5 categories: oral traditions and expressions, performing arts, social practices and festive events, knowledge and practices concerning nature and the universe, and traditional craftsmanship. Yan. And there is an ongoing call for research proposals. This is from the Cultural Communities and Traditional Arts section of the NCCA. So the call is on the NCCA website. You can try looking at it and try seeing, how you can submit a proposal. I'm hoping that this workshop will also push you, motivate you to come up with something and submit. The details are on the slide. Contact details of the art section on this slide, email address. Although the phone number may not be working, I'm not sure because people are on anong tawag dito, work from home. Okay. Now, other than those already mentioned, which relate specifically to heritage, there is now an NCCA 12-point research agenda that the Board of Commissioners of NCCA approved in December of 2016, together with the approval of the research program also in 2016. And in the NCCA research agenda, one of the items, that's item number 10, explicitly is on heritage. But of course, all of these, I would say, also have to do with heritage directly or indirectly, or can be associated with work on heritage. I would like to discuss this with you in more detail, but later on in the discussion. So for now, let's look at the item number 10. This is materials, methods, and models of cultural heritage conservation. And this encourages the submission of proposals in order to beef up our corpus of uh, research on materials, methods, and models of cultural heritage preservation, which would include cultural landscapes and sacred sites of indigenous peoples. Okay, this slide has the entry on the keyword heritage areas in the Encyclopedia of Philippine Art, which describes heritage as either tangible or intangible, defines what is tangible heritage, what is intangible heritage, and gives examples of each. So you'll have a chance to read this, since I'm going to give you a copy of the slides. But at the same time, I would like to invite you to check out the Encyclopedia of Philippine Art, CCP Encyclopedia of Philippine Art, digital edition, which is now live. Please subscribe and enjoy its rich resources. Now, I wanted to look also at formal degrees being offered in the Philippines to see what paradigms of heritage studies they espouse and teach. There is not much, however, and I found only, three? I have three slides on that. This is one. There is another one, which is the minor program. This is this is the MA program at the University of Santo, Tomas. And here we are also given the classifications or categories of cultural heritage: tangible, intangible, movable, and immovable heritage. No? Valued not because they are old, but because they are associated with phases of history, people, events of high significance. Now I'm reading some parts of it because I would like to go back to these ideas later on in the discussion. Now in LaSalle, we really don't have a program on heritage studies. However, I'm sure that there are minor courses that are being offered on heritage or touching on heritage. We have to start thinking about offering a program, surely. Now, next one is this from the Ateneo de Manila University. It's a minor program for undergraduates, a minor program for undergraduates. And if you look at the description, you will see that the program wants to train students who wish to tackle issues relating to cultural heritage. Look at that, to tackle issues relating to cultural heritage and develop actions aimed at maintaining elements of cultural heritage, such as, and they give us examples of, gives examples of what can be considered or studied as heritage. And the students are also going to be trained in social science skills to understand the context for the conservation of cultural heritage and to communicate a vivid awareness of Filipino cultural heritage. So the idea of Filipino cultural heritage and also the discourse of conservation. Okay, and the students are going to be working also with agencies and organizations as part of a practical program, that is part of the minor program. Now, the other thing is the Philippine Cultural Education Program of the NCCA as well. There are two diploma programs which are offered. graduate diploma in cultural education, and the other one is graduate diploma in teaching art. This has been going on for some years now, and there have been many graduates already. I'm sure some of you are probably graduates of the program. I'm not sure. But in the GDCE, there are courses that will train the students on heritage. No, the first one is the Full Ed 201 Review of Philippine History and Heritage. And the other one is a course on local cultural mapping. Local cultural mapping. And then again, of course, many of these courses have to do with heritage work as well. In the graduate diploma in teaching art, the students have 4 apprenticeship courses, and by means of the apprenticeship courses, the students are exposed to heritage work as well. Right, so let's take a breather. What do we know so far? I've listed 4 things. The first is that most heritage research is carried out through the initiative and with the support of the NCCA and the national cultural agencies attached to it. No? Of course, they are not the only ones. Definitely, they are not the only ones. And there are private organizations that also do heritage work. No? We met Cara yesterday in yesterday's session, who is part of ICOMOS, right? And then there is a Philippine Heritage Law that mandates support for research and notably for local culture studies. We have to remember that this is not purely a good thing. There are certain limitations in the way that the law has been crafted, and Dr. Cerudo has pointed out some of these limitations. No, the third one is that cultural heritage is defined in the law as the totality of cultural property, both tangible and intangible, preserved and developed through time and passed on to posterity. So it's worth bearing in mind. And the last thing is that there is little formal study on cultural heritage, as can be inferred from the lack of university programs. Now, the scholarship happens perhaps outside the frames of degree programs, in conferences like this one that we're having today. In 2004, there was such a conference from which came the articles in this special issue of the Philippine Quarterly of Culture and Society. In 2004, then, people were already talking about critical heritage. Of course, one note here is that the UN Convention on Intangible Heritage happened in 2003, and that might have something to do with the prompting of the discussions about critical heritage. But we have no way of verifying that, of course. Now, also, I have the article titles in that journal issue as examples of projects you might think of pursuing. So some of these projects are really interesting. Critical heritage and biodiversity conservation in northern Philippines. Asinan documenting Bohol's traditional method of salt production and the importance of salt in the region's early economy. Another one, the Kulasisi of the King, a folk Catholic courtship ritual traditionally performed by at Cebuano wakes. The Moro in the Moro, hegemonic representation in the Linambay place in Cebu, experiencing cultural heritage and indigenous tourism in Banawe, and Ahupu, I cannot pronounce it, Ahupua and Barangay, an essay on invisible heritage. Invisible heritage is something that we can mark for taking up later on. Now, another note for later, the issue has contributions that, according to the editor, elicits the holistics or enunciates the holistic spirit of heritage preservation. However, the introductory essay in this journal, unfortunately, does not elaborate beyond the notes I included here. And the notes say that the articles reflect the material as well as intangible characteristics of a few aspects of heritage culture, because some of those articles are very specific now about specific practices. And they broaden the discussion on critical heritage and contribute to the holistic vision that heritage preservation itself is critical to sustainability and good living in the world. Right. Now, from the Philippine setting, we go a bit outwards and look at some of the things in the international setting. And here on this slide, I have what's called the research strategy for cultural heritage research by the AHRC, or the Arts and Humanities Research Council of the United Kingdom. All of the ideas here you would have already heard about from the session since yesterday, which have been very enriching for a non-specialist like myself. However, I would like to go over the list of key research areas of the Arts and Humanities Research Council of the UK, which is a principal funding body for arts and humanities research. If you have a collaborator in the UK, you can apply for AHRC funding, although the principal investigator will not be yourself. Now, again, this is a way of learning about current research priorities and strategies of funding bodies, which to a great extent chart the directions of research. But even if you're not looking to apply for funding, this is a way to prompt and provoke thinking about what research to pursue. A little glance at this slide before we move on to the next one, no, on the key research areas. Uh, this one has an answer, a straight answer to the question, what is heritage research? And the answer given here is that it's a vibrant, innovative, highly collaborative, and cross-disciplinary research field. And it draws, that's why it's called cross-disciplinary. It draws insights from across the arts and humanities and connecting with developments in science, technology, and practice, which we heard about yesterday, in the talk on nanotechnology, in the talk about computer technology, being involved in the study of heritage, and leading to significant wider impacts and benefits both within the heritage sector and beyond. It takes a broad view of cultural heritage. I'm talking about not heritage research per se, but heritage research as identified or described, or rather as articulated by the AHRC, or as preferred by the AHRC. So incorporating the tangible, intangible, digital, intellectual, artistic, and the connections between them and of heritage-related processes. Now, just to mark it here, from tangible, intangible, movable, immovable, we now hear digital, intellectual, and artistic as possible classifications also of cultural heritage. And last but not least, it recognizes that there are important research and practice issues surrounding the conceptualization and use of the term heritage. Now, exactly what these issues are and how intense these issues are, we will see in the next few slides. All right. There are 8 key research areas identified by the AHRC. I'll go over each one and we will try to see how each can pertain to Philippine research. But one brief comment before anything else, I'd like to encourage thinking that goes beyond national confines. If you're a researcher, you should be working towards joining the international conversations and contributing to it, not just tailing along or consuming the work of others, especially foreign others. The world needs our contributions. So while we do research in the Philippines and our research subjects might be primarily Philippine, we do research as a member of the global community of practice. Having said that, Okay, let's look at the key research areas. The first one here is values and cultural heritage. And examples of research questions that this might cover are the following. What counts as cultural heritage? How is it chosen? How does this change? In increasingly diverse slash plural societies? How does it shape identities? How and when are different types of heritage recognized, experienced, embraced, represented, or ignored? And of course, at the back of our minds, probably we are thinking about all of the things that we heard since yesterday. Now, we are ourselves a diverse society, but while this is widely recognized, there has been an understandable primary emphasis on being nation, on the national, and the ongoing question of what make up our national identity, what are our distinct values and heritage as a people. We should not stop asking these questions, but also it is good to focus on specific types of heritage or specific practices, events, phenomena, objects, places, etc., which are really what make up in concrete terms, what we call the Filipino cultural heritage. Of course, an important concern suggested here is the need to interrogate or investigate how any practice, event, object, structure, or whatnot come to be comes to be designated or chosen as part of the national cultural heritage. The second is community and public engagement, inclusion, and diverse heritages. So, examples of research questions: how, why, with what results do people engage with their heritage and the heritage of others? And why does it matter to them? Whose voices get heard in decisions about heritage management and about what diverse or at-risk heritages are conserved for the future? How can academic research be better connected with public heritage activities, and how can these contribute to better understanding of processes such as commemoration? Now there is a mention of citizen history and heritage, which is worth looking into. Well, this year we are commemorating the 500th year of the arrival of Christianity in the Philippines, which, however, can be framed in various other ways, as some people are doing. 500th year of the coming of the Spanish colonizers, the coming of Magellan and his death, and the heroism of Lapu-Lapu, 500th year of the first circumnavigation of the world, and so on. How are these part of our heritage is the question. And why? What are the contesting views, discourses, opinions, emotions? This is an example of what can be covered in this research area and about which we can ask the questions of why does it matter or how does it matter to people, and why there are conflicting opinions and emotions, varying investments or non-investment. I am reminded of the discussion yesterday where Dr. Ian Morley said heritage is an elitist concept, and that in his observation in the Philippines, it is something that tend to be imposed on the people, on the populace, even if, or perhaps because it is so removed from people's everyday concerns. Third, sustainable management of heritage. Are the paradigms of heritage protection that have served us well in the past equally fit to respond to the challenges of the future, so future heritages? What new paradigms are emerging for managing, governing, making decisions about, engaging, safeguarding, adapting, or our cultural heritage in a rapidly changing world? How does heritage management need to adapt in the face of pressures such as those from infrastructure, urban development, more mobile populations, and environmental change? So how does the impetus of sustainability affect heritage protection and management? We heard so much about this since yesterday. Each and every case is a push and pull situation. Each party in conflict or potential conflict situation, neither absolutely right nor absolutely wrong, except, at least in my view, except when we start talking about blatantly expropriative, exploitative actions, say, of mining companies that risk the disappearance of indigenous heritage sites and practices. For cases like this, protecting the indigenous heritage is always the right position and argument on the side of sustainability. Now, an example from yesterday, Dr. Nashati Mod Yakub's talk on a sustainable approach that includes access needs of people with disabilities. Really interesting discussion. The next one, number 4, future heritages, new uses / reuse of heritages, and exploiting the potential of digital and other technologies. So specific research questions can be, how can heritage be used as a resource for cultural, social, and economic well-being beyond tourism and conservation? Can heritage help us to imagine and shape different futures for society? How can we identify, conserve the emergent heritages that will be of value to future generations? How can we support innovative uses of tangible and intangible heritage skills such as craft? In the Philippines, the local situation is usually that the work on cultural heritage falls to the tourism office, or that culture and tourism are merged as a concern. This is a very problematic setup because tourism becomes or has become the dominant concern, such that cultural heritage work has been subsumed under it. Now, don't get me wrong, I do not per se oppose the idea, but I still say we should support cultural heritage work, not because we want to make a showcase of ourselves to foreign visitors or to make money, but because culture is integral to our life. Cultural heritage is something that we need, in order to have a good life, as a nation, as a people. I'm sorry if this is a very opinionated discussion, but okay. Number 5, intangible, emerging, hidden, and contested heritages. How might emerging forms of future heritage be identified more effectively? How are new heritage discoveries reshaping understandings of the past and of other heritages and their significance? How might intangible heritages be more sustainably conserved and exploited in the future? How can arts and humanities research contribute to processes which uncover hidden heritages, rediscover lost heritages, make greater use of underexplored or reserved collections, understand entangled heritages, and or enable the revaluation and reinterpretation of undervalued heritages? Now, my comment, in the Philippines, we should ask what are emerging futures for us? And of course, us here will necessarily be multiple, archipelagic, as our physical space is archipelagic. It would be good to also think about the difference between intangible and hidden or emerging, and the terms of contestation for heritages which are contested. And if we have heritages which are now lost or in the process of being lost, and what might be the causes of such loss? Okay. Now, number 6, changing heritage economies. How can research further enrich heritage experiences and encounters and enhance the contribution of heritage to the growth of the experience economy? How can we better realize the potential for interdisciplinary and collaborative research, heritage research, to inspire creativity and innovation, which contributes to the creative economy? How can we better understand the role that heritage plays in cultural ecosystems and clusters, placemaking, infrastructure developments, and local, rural, urban, and regional economic development, and to the digital economy? Earlier, I spoke about the problematics of doing cultural heritage work that is primarily in service of tourism. I stand firmly on this critical view and strongly oppose the idea that the value of cultural heritage should be measured by how much it contributes to the economy. Such a view will only worsen the situation whereby there is inequality and lack of appreciation and support for works, artifacts, practices which are deemed to lack high significance. So there it is, that word, significance, high significance, or do not meet so-called aesthetic or artistic merits, or do not earn any revenue. We have to remember that all these are affected by existing structural inequalities in the economic, social, and political spheres. And I remember uh, the discussion in yesterday's session also, talking about placemaking and all of these things. Now, having said that, however, it is also important to include in our concerns as researchers and advocates the place and role of culture and the arts in the economy. As pointed out in a recent congressional consultation with artists in the performing arts, we are losing potential gains that can be realized from the creative industries in the country because there is little state support in terms of fund allocation as well as in policy formulation or in law, in legislation. The artists and creatives are left to fend for themselves to a large extent, and therefore many of them work in precarious conditions as freelancers who always have to negotiate payment for their work and have no job security. Now, anyhow, there is much that can be subjects of research in this area. There are key terms here that call for extended exploration. First one of that being experience economy. And of course, creativity, innovation, cultural ecosystem development, and the digital economy. The seventh, penultimate one in the list, heritage, contested pasts, and conflict. How can research inform the management of heritages at risk from conflict slash fragile or aid recovery from the loss of heritage? What role does illegal trade in heritage artifacts or the use or destruction of heritage play in conflict contexts? How is heritage appropriated or exploited in the perpetuation or prosecution of conflict? What role can heritage management and commemorative processes play in post-conflict peace building and reconciliation processes? Now, the last two questions here are worth repeating because bearing in mind our own experience of conflicted pasts, how is heritage appropriated or exploited in the perpetuation or prosecution of conflict? What role can heritage management and commemorative processes play in post-conflict peace building and reconciliation processes? You can take any experience in the past or the recent past and see that they are sites of sometimes very emotional and passionate and violent clashes of memory. The Philippine-American War, episodes like those in Balangiga, martial law under Marcos, the Escalante Massacre, the Marawi Siege, or Duterte's drug war and the extrajudicial killings, to name only a few, which, by the way, is still ongoing. These are experiences of trauma, and heritage management that would touch on these experiences will always be a delicate, challenging work. Can heritage research in any way help in peace building and reconciliation, especially since, for the most part, what makes the work difficult is the fact that the past is not over, but continuing in the present. Right, last but not least in the list, global heritages, international development, and global challenges. How can heritage economies contribute to international development and the UN Sustainable Development Goals and or to the development of aid and humanitarian strategies or cultural diplomacy? How can research inform approaches to addressing the challenges for heritage created by international development, globalization, rapid urbanization, climate change, and high mobility? Can critical heritage research play a role in facilitating trisectoral partnerships slash collaborative governance in pursuit of tackling global challenges? Here, the invitation is to look at the global challenges to heritage research. Keywords to note are global heritages, heritage economies, the UN SDGs, cultural diplomacy, and trisectoral partnerships or collaborative governance. So those are the eight in the list of AHRC, the Arts and Humanities Research Council of the UK. Right. Now, having gone through this list of key research areas and connecting them to many of the themes, issues, and discussions in the conference on rethinking heritage, it is apparent that the rethinking of heritage invites a reappraisal of the dominant paradigms of heritage work. Earlier, we saw that in 2004, the term critical heritage was already the subject of the University of San Carlos conference and the journal issue that was published from it later in 2007. I am certain there were many other discussions that came after it. There is more to heritage than its classifications of tangible and intangible, movable and immovable, which are now stretched to their limits, such that other classifications have come up. In the AHRC, there are now others like digital, intellectual, and artistic. This only shows how limited the categories are, and the challenge is to constantly interrogate them. Now, on this slide, we get acquainted with the term critical heritage studies, which was also in the last item of the AHRC list, and the Association of Scholars committed to pursuing precisely that. I would like to read the text of this slide. Above all, we want you to critically engage with the proposition that heritage studies needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, which requires the ruthless criticism of everything existing. Heritage is, as much as anything, a political act, and we need to ask serious questions about the power relations that heritage has all too often been invoked to sustain. Nationalism, imperialism, colonialism, cultural elitism, Western triumphalism, social exclusion based on class and ethnicity, and the fetishizing of expert knowledge have all exerted strong influences on how heritage is used, defined, and managed. We argue that a truly critical heritage studies will ask many uncomfortable questions of traditional ways of thinking about and doing heritage, and that the interests of the marginalized and excluded, no, I remember Nick De Ocampo talking about this, will be brought to the forefront when posing these questions. The study of heritage has historically been dominated by Western, predominantly European experts in archaeology, history, architecture, and art history. Though there have been progressive currents in these disciplines, they sustain a limited idea of what heritage is and how it should be studied and managed. The old way of looking at heritage, the authorized heritage discourse, privileges old, grand, prestigious, expert approved sites, buildings, and artifacts that sustain Western narratives of nation, class, and science. There is now enough sustained dissatisfaction with this way of thinking about heritage that its critics can feel confident in coming together to form an international organization to promote a new way of thinking about and doing heritage. If you're interested in their work or would like to be a member, you may contact them via their website. Now, the term authorized heritage discourse, or AHD, is introduced in this book, Uses of Heritage 2006, and has had a tremendous impact on critical scholarship on heritage. In the European Commission document that I will discuss in a bit, published in 2018, Laura Jane Smith, the author of this book, Laura Jane Smith's writing in this book is still quoted. The book is available for free download online if you are interested. A more recent book that talks about new directions of a new field of critical heritage studies is this one, Politics of Scale, New Directions in Critical Studies, published by Bergan Books, New York in 2019, so fairly recently. The introductory essay is free to download. I'd like to read the first few paragraphs, which are quite pertinent to our question about heritage research. And I quote, scholarly research of cultural heritage has faced paradigmatic changes during the past few decades. These changes have occurred in part as a reaction to diverse social, political, economic, cultural transformations of societies and traditional foundations of nation states. Today's world, characterized by network agencies, global cultural flows, cultural hybridity, and movement of people within and across borders, contextualizes the idea of heritage in new ways. It challenges its previous core function as a bedrock of monocultural nation building projects, a continuation of elitist cultural canons, and as upholding Eurocentric cultural values. As a part of this transformation, consensual heritage narratives about the nation and national identity have been questioned and contested through various identity claims and below and above the national narrative and within it. A range of communities defined either geographically or by cultural, social, economic, ethnic, religious, or linguistic experiences have increasingly asserted the legitimacy of their collective identities and of their heritage as this identity's manifestation. These developments have brought heritage research into a new critical phase. During the last decades of the 20th century, academic fields within humanities and social sciences took increasing interest in uneven power relations, hierarchical power structures, silence narratives, and alternative emancipatory and empowering identity projects. Critical research stemming from postmodernism, poststructuralism, and Foucauldian perspectives on power gave ground to and strengthened new academic disciplines of postcolonial, racial, gender, new museology, and subaltern studies. The theoretical frame of this critical research also renewed disciplines that more explicitly focus on the study of cultural heritage. In cultural heritage studies, the change from the previous emphasis of conservation and preservation of heritage, although these questions are also still debated, to complex questions of the power that heritage entails and produces, has generated a field of study and a scholarly approach called critical heritage studies. Rather than asking what we do to heritage, what do we do to heritage? Scholars within the field, such as Smith and Harrison, have posed the question, what does heritage do? How is heritage used? They perceive the ideas, practices, and processes of heritage as inherently political, emerging within complex power relations, and open to change and contest. The exploration of power relations in critical heritage studies focuses particularly on several grand narratives that have dominated the meaning, making, and practices of heritage for centuries: nationalism, imperialism, colonialism, Western triumphalism, and social exclusion based on class and ethnicity, cultural elitism, and the fetishizing of expert knowledge have all had a crucial impact on how cultural heritage is discussed, used, and managed. These ideas and ideologies have arguably influenced what has been understood and defined as cultural heritage by privileging old, grand, prestigious, expert-approved sites, buildings, and artifacts that sustain Western narratives of nation, class, and science. Critical heritage studies seeks to question and unravel the previous and still existing hegemonic power structures in heritage and scrutinize the workings of power in heritage from a broad interdisciplinary perspective. The recent studies on cultural heritage perceive the concept as a presentist process. It is not a passive act of preserving things from the past, but an active process of assembling a series of objects, places, and practices that we choose to hold up as a mirror to the present, associated with a particular set of values that we wish to take with us into the future. The concept of heritage itself is understood in this critical perspective as a complex, and relational phenomenon that draws together and joins various social and cultural entities such as material objects, places, values, ideas, emotions, memory, and identity. Hmm. Now, the impetus of critical heritage studies is clearly felt and shared by heritage scholars all across the world, and this conference is proof of that. There are other similar efforts around the world. Here are three examples from Europe. These from the University of Sussex. We'll not go into that anymore. This next one is a collaboration between the University of Gothenburg and University College London. And then here is the at Leiden University, Critical Approaches to Heritage Studies, which is actually a module, I think a course that you might want to look at. As I said, each of these slides has a link, and you can click on the link in order to see the site. This one is an example in Asia, because the collection, the anthologies of essays on Asia. And believe you me, this is the only one I found talking about Asia in my limited search online. Now, clarifying the critical, we have been talking about critical heritage studies, and probably we have to look at something like this, that there is a need to clarify what critical means. There is a paper on academia that you can download if you have access to academia, which is very interesting, which I think is somehow in between the more conservative and then the critical heritage studies. The paper considers the term critical in the unfolding formulation of critical heritage studies. It argues for a shift in emphasis from the subject of our effort to the object of attention. In other words, focusing primarily on the critical issues that face the world today, the larger issues that bear upon and extend outwards from heritage. To that end, the paper presents two key directions. It suggests much is to be gained from tackling the uneasy relationship that currently exists between social science and humanities-based approaches to heritage and the professional conservation sector oriented by a scientific materialism. And second, there is a need for heritage studies to account for its relationship to today's regional and global transformations by developing post-Western understandings of culture, history, and heritage, and the socio-political forces that actualize them. Some of the key quotes that I highlight here are these ones, now worth looking at. Heritage studies has embarked upon a critical turn, that's obvious. But he also comments that in their most strident form, critical approaches to heritage can be anti-heritage. And he asks, how can that be productive? And heritage culture has rapidly come to the fore in many countries around the world, and this has been related to the creative economy, how to make money out of heritage. Right. So there are shifting paradigms and research imperatives. I've listed some of these here as a way of summarizing the previous discussion. So shifts in paradigms that we can note, from tangible to intangible, and expanding categories to include the digital. And then interrogation of authorized heritage discourse from Laura Jane Smith, from conservation/preservation discourse to complex questions of the power that heritage entails and produces. And then also from what do we do with heritage to what does heritage do, or how is heritage used? The last one being the question that the critical heritage studies advocates would like to pose. and the need for dialogue, no? From Winters, the need for dialogue and collaboration between academics, researchers, critics, and heritage conservation preservation professionals. So I would like to know if there are heritage professionals among us today so that we can have a kind of dialogue. And then from Winters, I would like to just point this out. Material-centric, science-based approaches to heritage and conservation are inadequately equipped to deal with the array of issues heritage is now enmeshed in, such as poverty reduction, climate change, sustainability, human rights, democracy, the future of the state, and of course, the protection and preservation of cultural heritage itself. There is therefore real benefit of if those working on heritage in the social sciences and humanities engage in issues-based research more directly rather than simply criticizing UNESCO or those who are in the professional heritage work sector, according to Winters. And he was commenting in 2013. Well, it behooves us to ask the same questions probably at this point, especially in light of Corona. Now, the following slides, I will not discuss them in detail anymore, but these are discussions of the current tendencies and contexts of cultural heritage. It's excerpted from the European Commission's report in 2018 entitled Innovation in Cultural Heritage Research. Now, and we have to pay attention to this. Now, if we are looking to make a proposal for funding from Europe, at least to the EU. Heritage studies in an interdisciplinary and heterogeneous field with academics working in disciplines such as art history, archaeology, architecture history, and so on. So this is the way that cultural heritage studies is seen in that document. The interdisciplinary nature of the field has resulted in a varying range of research focuses. Some researchers have been more interested in the physical treatment of heritage and the methods of conservation and heritage valuation, while others have wanted to explain heritage as phenomenon. And these are those who are already involved in critical heritage studies. There is discussion of heritage nationalism and other skills. And what's important to note here is this comment that it remains ever valid to make explicit through research the links between heritage and nation, especially in the Philippine context where we are all preoccupied with nation building, no? And national identity. We should continue interrogating the idea. And then there is a note about the discursiveness of heritage, no, in parallel to its materiality, and acknowledgement of the term authorized heritage discourse, as I was saying, from the book Uses of Heritage by Lord James Smith. Um, this is very interesting. Look at it. Heritage as essentially a discursive construction shaped by specific circumstances. This is still coming from critical heritage studies. Plural AHDs then is a critique towards the prevailing Western understanding of heritage as a material object and a thing. Rather, heritage can be seen as a process, a performance, an act of communication, and a set of relationships with the past and undertaken at certain sites and places. In this sense, all heritage is intangible. No? All heritage is intangible. Very interesting idea. And that heritage as representation actually is opposed to the idea of heritage as performance and affective, no? As performative and affective. So more about that. And then the shift from tangible to intangible. So this is just really marking the shift, you know, in UNESCO from the focus on the tangible to the intangible, and recognizing the role, the significant role of communities as bearers of heritage. Now, I'm not sure if you've already seen this, but let's play that. Can you hear the the sound?
Heritage takes infinite forms. It is the source of human creativity and culture.
Is there sound? Renee, is there
Yes, we
sound?
hear it. We hear it.
Okay, great.
Intangible cultural heritage takes infinite forms. It is the source of human creativity and cultural diversity. Living heritage brings human beings and communities closer together. The 2003 Convention aims at safeguarding this heritage and ensuring its continuous transmission. In 10 years, UNESCO listed almost 500 intangible cultural heritage elements. But how do we grasp the diversity of these elements? How are the cultural practices of communities across more than 100 countries connected? UNESCO mapped them all against 1,000 concepts and invites you to dive into intangible cultural heritage. How does living heritage relate to nature? And what about you? What about your heritage? Keep it lively and pass it on.
Right. Um, I'm asking myself, what about our heritage? Because I was trying initially to explore the site, and I could not see anything from the Philippines, you know, in that web of intangible heritage practices, objects, materials, etc., that have been mapped by UNESCO. I invite you to click the link here later on when you have a copy of the presentation, in order to go into the site and to and to explore it uh, as an additional way of being uh, familiarizing yourself with the intangible cultural heritage idea and manifestations. Okay, I was planning to go into that, but we don't have much time. Right. This course of the University College London targets qualitative research in heritage studies, which include qualitative research skills, now which include ethnography in theory and practice, research ethics, object-based methodologies, archival science, participant observation, internet ethnography, spatial methodologies, as well as professional skills like making a research-based policy pitch to a heritage organization and a grant application to a research funding body. Okay, now at this point, I'd like now to go into a discussion of the NCCA research program, brief background on it. I'll take up I don't think I have time to go into the 12-point research agenda. We'll just look at the slide. and then proceed to a discussion of the grants and awards, the guidelines, now a few of the guidelines, screening and approval process, what goes into the proposal packet, and then the research proposal form. Okay, now I need to transfer to another, I'll end the show here, and um, sorry. Uh, okay, are you able to see the slides? Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So research at the NCCA is mandated. And here you can see the part of RA 7356, which is the NCCA law that specifically mandates that the NCCA should support research, research into culture and the arts. As I was saying, the program, the NCCA research program, had been in development for a long time. The NCCA is now more than 30 years old, but the research program was only formally established in 2016. Now, before that, there were, of course, support mechanisms for research, but not in the way that it is now set up as a program. And we had to look at initial documents that have been drafted for a formal program to be established at the NCCA, and merged it with the documents that we started developing in 2016. So early 2016, and then uh, the whole year was a year of working on it and lobbying for it, convincing people about it, and eventually, the Board of Commissioners approved the proposal, and we had to lobby for funding. Now, approval was just one, but the funding was another one. So it started with an initial fund of 2 million only in 2017 for that cycle of grants. And then eventually funds were added. And now all research proposals go through the technical working group on research or for research. And the budget now stands at 6 million a year. Now that's going to be the fund for 2022. Okay, so as I was saying, I don't have time to go into the research agenda, but perhaps it suffices to say at this point that the agenda, of course, should be reviewed maybe in a year's time, because it's going to be 5 years old already, and you might want to contribute to the review and perhaps reformulation of the agenda in such a way that cultural heritage will have a distinct item in the agenda, not only heritage conservation, but something else, no? Okay. Now the research and grants, research grants and awards. These are awards actually. There is only one grant The rest are all awards. Now, what is the difference between a grant and an award? No, an award is given to an individual. It cannot be given to an organization. It is given always to an individual. And the way that it works is that uh, for the grant, you have to liquidate each and every cent, of the money that is given to you. But the award is an award. In other words, it's up to you to use it for how you need it, and there is no liquidation that is required anymore. The output that you are going to submit is enough as proof that you have deserved the award. Um, and then before that, the way that it worked before was that it was for reimbursement. In other words, you have to put in your own money first before you can get any support from the NCCA. No, so you have to fund your own research first. But we argued that precisely, and these are very small amounts, not precisely, the researchers need the money in order to do work, to do research, and they need the money immediately. I mean, as soon as they are given the award should actually be given to them in terms of the actual disbursement of funds. So here are the classifications of the awards and grants. Let's begin with the grant. The grant is given to an organization. No, there's only usually one slot a year, but all the others are awards. So there is now an MA thesis award. There is a dissertation writing award. And then for those who are not students anymore, you can apply for an individual research award, and uh, and and there's also a community research award, no, community research award. Okay, how much is uh, or are each of those? No, for the thesis and dissertation, a thesis award is 75,000. Dapat dagdagan na to kasi parang masyado nang maliit siya, no? Dissertation award is 150,000. And the qualification is that that an applicant must be endorsed by the advisor or research supervisor and the college dean. In other words, the proposal must have passed the proposal defense already. And the approved proposal is the one submitted with the application. Right, so yung mga graduate students dyan, mag-apply na kayo for 2022. For the individual research, I would like to say that in the past years, hindi na uubos, no? The slots were not used up, no, in the previous years, no, for either the reason that nobody qualified, no. I mean, there were applications, but they did not make it, no, in the screening, and or the other reason is that there were just not enough applications, no. So mag-apply na po kayo, sayang naman. No? We will not be able to lobby for more money for research if the research money that is given is not exhausted. Okay, for the individual research, it's 300,000 each. The proponent must be able to submit the following requirements, no? A copy of the research report accompanied by a certification of its authenticity. This is about the track record of the individual researcher who must have already had completed the research prior to application with the NCCA, no? And then also that the results of such completed research should have been presented, no? And the research should have been within the last 5 years. Okay. For the organizational research, this is This should be by a non-stock, non-profit, and maybe a people's organization or a civil society organization. So ganun din, the organization should have had a track record of at least one completed research, and you have to show proof that you have completed the research and that you have presented the research in a public forum or uh, a public event. For the community research, this was added. There used to be no community research grant, but we felt that there should be because this is intended for the indigenous communities. Now, we do not want the indigenous communities to compete for the individual grants or individual awards or for the organization awards because after all, we're looking at few, very few slots, no? So here, there usually are 3 slots every year, and that's going to be 1 slot for Luzon, 1 for Visayas, and 1 for Mindanao. But I tell you that these 3 slots are usually not used up. So we would like to encourage indigenous communities to apply for the research, no, for the research award. The award may be to an individual or an organization who must be recognized by the specific community as representing that community or working with them as a partner or consultant. So if you are not indigenous yourself, but you are working with an indigenous community, you can be qualified for this grant. There should be a document signed by the community elder or leader that contains a brief description of your or your organization's part involvement with the community. And then existing guidelines for research awards to individuals apply to community research by an individual, while those for organization applications will be governed by the guidelines for organization research. The TWG may decide to reassign slots to meritorious qualified proposals in case there are no takers from a region, but there are more qualified applicants than the number of slots for another region. I cannot remember, but I think for 2020 or was it 2019, there were several proposals from Mindanao, but nothing from Luzon. Or was it more from Luzon or nothing from Mindanao, something like that. But 1 slot for Luzon, 1 for Visayas, 1 for Mindanao is not set in stone. There has to be some flexibility so that we can use the money. Now, the NCCA through the TWG may assign a mentor to provide technical assistance to a community research project when deemed necessary. And the cost of the mentoring will be charged to funds, not to you, but to funds of the NCCA research program. Right. So, what makes up a research proposal packet? Now, of course, the first one is the research proposal form, which I'm going to go into detail later on. And then you have to identify the lead researcher and co-researchers, provide their bios, describing qualifications and current institutional affiliations if they are affiliated with institutions, plus the contact details, or the research management team if the proponent is an organization. And there also is a requirement of a declaration of ethical conduct and supporting documents. I'll go into that a bit later. Now, the screening and approval process. First is you submit, and then NCCA receives it. There is a verification of the research proposal submitted, and the verification is going to be conducted by the secretariat. You might get some phone calls in order to verify all of the things that you submitted. The next step is a review and endorsement by the research TWG. So this is the second level review, where the TWG sits down and pores over all of the documents that you submitted, and they come up with a short list of who's going to get the grant or awards. And then this short list is submitted to a panel of experts. So the panel of experts are extraneous outside of the technical working group of the NCCA, and they come from all over the country. They are those who are in specific areas, of expertise, and they are engaged by the NCCA in order to help see whether the proposals are worth supporting. And after that, because what the panel of experts does is to grade, to rate or assess the proposals, and they come up with a rank. No, for example, if for example there are 10 applications in the shortlist, no, for individual awards, the panel of experts will rank the 10. And on the basis of such decision, the step 4 now will happen. And this, step 4 will actually be, the, bakit kulang ito? No, there's supposed to be another one. Anyway, after the decision of the panel of experts, there is another session by the research PWG, who comes up with a final decision on the basis of first the shortlisting and also the decision of the panel of experts. And then the decision is elevated to the NCCA Board of Commissioners for approval and disbursement of the funds. Ito pa pala yung ethics screening and approval process. So initial review, ethics review, which is done by the TWG. There is a double-blind review by the panel of experts, and then endorsement for the board approval. Okay, so you need to use the NCCA program proposal forms, and these are all available on the website of NCCA. I will go over the proposal form later. Okay, so this is the call. There are going to be the number of slots are not stated here, but the call is clear that all of the all of the types rather of grants and awards are going to be given for 2022. Research award for an individual grant, still 300,000. Research award for an organization, still 500,000. Community research, one each for Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, 500,000 each. And then PhD dissertation award, 150,000, and the MA thesis award is 75,000. The deadline is June 30, 2021. So you have at least 1 full month to prepare for this. I will entertain questions later on, but for now, let's go to, I need to share another one. Are you still okay? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, sige, papalakihin ko ba ito o ano? Ito po yung research proposal form na nasa maayos, ano na siya, may NCCA logo, ayos na siya sa isang tunay na form. So, sa ngayon, ito yung aking kopya kasi. Filipino na ako kasi naka-Filipino ang mga tanong dito sa NCCA Research Proposal Form. And by the way, we also want actually to translate this to local languages. Hindi pa nagagawa. Pero pwede kayong mag-submit ng proposal na gamit ang inyong local language. Ano man yon, no? Ano man yon. Kahit hindi yon isa dun sa tinatawag na 8 or 10 major languages in the Philippines, for example. No? Kasi kung yun ang pamamaraan kung na kayo ay makakapag-submit ng proposal, then pangyarihin natin ang ganon. Right. So, itong research proposal form ay naka-Ingles at naka-Filipino. Yung Filipino version ay in the form of questions para mas madaling intindihin, no? Para hindi ganun ka-technical pag sinabi mong working title of the research, ano 'yon. So, ang unang tanong dito, ano ang tawag sa pag-aaral na ito? So simple lang, ano ang tawag dito sa pag-aaral na ito? And it doesn't have to be ano kaya nga working title ang tawag, no? You can always change it later. Pangalawa, ibigay ang buod ng pag-aaral, no? So you're given 150 words lang ito. Ito yung abstract. Pwedeng balikan na lang ito kasi kung gagamitin mo siya as a thinking tool or a planning tool, itong research proposal form, mas maganda dahil pinaprompt yung pag-iisip mo kung paano mo gagawin yung proposal, no? At itong buod, usually, dalawang approach dito eh. For example, ako, it works for me that I work on the abstract first, no? It becomes like my plan, itong abstract, no? Itong buod ng pag-aaral. But you can always go back to it and change it, no? After you've done all of the questions, you've answered all of the questions, and you think, this is the way that it will work for you. No? Pero it would be good to do something like, an abstract na in the first place para kumbaga ma-condition yung isip mo kung ano yung pag-aaral na gagawin mo. Pangatlo, ano ang gustong malaman sa pamamagitan ng proyektong ito? May guwang o kawalan ba ng kaalaman na mapupunan ng proyekto? No? So, guwang is the gap. No? Lalo na, halimbawa, nasa community, ano kaya ang gusto niyong malaman sa pamamagitan ng proyekto? Halimbawa, simpleng paglilista lang ng mga halaman na endemic dun sa lugar ninyo. No? Matatagpuan dun lamang sa lugar ninyo. O yung mga hayop na nandyan pa at nakikita pa sa inyong komunidad. No? Baka simpleng dokumentasyon lang po pwede. No? Po pwede yun. Basta't nakikita kung ano yung value ng ganong klase ng pagbubuo ng, kumbaga, ay archive ng kaalaman ng komunidad. No? Magandang makita, halimbawa, kung ano ang tawag dun sa mga halaman na yon, no? Ano ang tawag sa mga kahoy na nandyan pa sa kanilang komunidad? Ano ang tawag sa mga hayop na makikita pa sa kanilang komunidad? Bilang example lang, no? So, dito explain lang kung ano yung sagot dun sa simpleng tanong na ito at ang guwang o kawalan ng kaalaman na mapupunan ng proyekto, ganun din, no? Hindi kailangang masyadong komplikado. Pang-apat, ano-ano ang mga pag-aaral ng ano-ano ng mga pag-aaral ang naisagawa o nalathala tungkol o na may kinalaman sa bagay, gawain, lugar at iba pa na subject ng research. Paano ang mga ito nakakatulong sa pag-aaral na ito? Medyo nakakakomplika pag binasa mo yung English Review of Related Literature Studies, no? Kasi parang napaka-technical. Pero ang simpleng gusto lang nating malaman, may mga nag-aral na ba ng anong gusto mong pag-aralan? Ano ba, gusto mong pag-aralan ang, from my area ng performance. Gusto mong pag-aralan ang Black Nazarene. O, pinag-aaralan na yan ni Xiao Chua ngayon. At probably hindi lang si Xiao Chua ang nag-aaral niyan. Marami pang iba. Ano kaya ang mga nakita nila sa pag-aaral? Ba't mo gustong pag-aralan ulit? Di ba? Ano kaya ang hindi pa nakita ng mga ibang nag-aral. Pero of course, para ma-identify mo kung ano yung hindi pa nakita ng ibang nag-aral, titingnan mo kung ano yung mga pinag-aralan nila. No? So, ito lang naman ang ibig natin sabihin ng review of related studies or review of related literature. At kung ang applicant ay nasa komunidad, hindi kailangan masyadong busisi ito. Kung kinakailangan nila ng tulong, tutulungan natin sila para masagutan itong bahaging ito ng proposal form. Panglima, ilarawan o isalaysay kung paano isasagawa ang pananaliksik. No? Paano isasagawa ang pananaliksik? Ano ang mga pangunahing ideya na pinagmumulan at anong mga pamamaraan ng pangangalap ng datos ang gagamitin. Kung ang example natin ay halimbawa yung kanina na listing, no, inventory ng mga hayop, flora and fauna for instance sa kanilang komunidad. Paano kaya siya gagawin? So ano yung balak, no, sa kung paano siya gagawin? Ano yung mga pangunahing ideya na pinagmumulan, maybe too complicated, say for a community who just wants to put together they may simply kumbaga in a way justify kung bakit nila pwedeng gustong gawin yon at ano yung mga rason nila. Halimbawa, gusto nilang i-conserve yung kanilang natural environment, no? Kung pwedeng yun ang sabihin, halimbawa sa ganung klase ng inventory research. No? So, but of course, this for the researchers, this is the methodology and methods of study part. And then the sixth, ano ang mga target na output? Oh, by the way, number 6, no, talking about heritage research, dito na po pwede mong gawin ang pagdidesisyon kung ano nga ba ang diskurso, ano nga ba ang klase ng framework ang gagamitin mo sa iyong gustong pag-aralan. No? Ito ba ay conservation project? Ito ba ay interrogation of existing ideas regarding heritage, no? O kung nakatutok siya sa isang particular na heritage object, event, phenomenon, etc., magandang makita kung paano mo i-approach ang pag-aaral na yon at anong mga methods ang gagamitin mo para makalap mo ang mga datos, no? Nakakailanganin mo at paano mo i-analyze ang mga yon. Number 6, ano ang mga target na output ng proyekto kung meron? Kasi baka research report lang ang output. Pero kung meron, pwedeng pwedeng kung ito ay para sa isang produksyon, halimbawa, kasi po pwede kang magsagawa ng research na ang intention mo ay gagamitin yung research mo para makapagbuo ng isang produksyon sa teatro, o isang film, o isang nobela, o kaya video documentary. So sabihin lang kung ano itong mga target output, no? Ano yung mga intended outputs. Pero what I am saying is that you don't have to do that if you don't have any plan on doing that. No, it's just pure research. Halimbawa, gusto mong gawin ang research na ito at ang output mo ay isang article sa isang journal. O yun na yun, no? O kaya research output, no? Research report tungkol doon. At later on na yung mga artikulo tungkol dito, libro, etc. No, that's not part of what's going to be submitted to the NCCA. Number 7, ilarawan kung ano ang hangarin ng proyekto, ano ang kabuluhan nito o kung paano makakatulong. Ano ang kontribusyon nito na bagong kaalaman o kaya'y kontribusyon sa sining at kultura ng Pilipinas. So ito na yung what's the significance of the study. How do you intend for this to say something, no, about our heritage, no, our cultural heritage in the country, either in the macro dimension or in the micro dimension. Number 8 is your timetable or work plan. And then number 9, by the way, yung timetable mo, 1 taon lang po, kailangan matapos mo na yung proyekto. Kaya, syempre, ganun din lang kakonti yung funding kasi hindi naman siya pang matagalan na project, no? So, syempre, yung timetable mo should fall within the timeline also of the funding body, which is the NCCA. And number 9, this is your budget. No? Ano ang pagkakagastusan? Magkano ang kailangan sa bawat isa? So, this is the line item budget. Now, I was saying that we do not really ask or the NCCA will not ask for liquidation of the awards, no? And in fact, you can use it any way you want, no? Depende sa priority ng pagre-research mo, no? Kaya lang hinihingi pa rin itong pagkakagastusan o yung budget para matulungan kang planuhin ang iyong paggastos, no, sa research, sorry, sa research budget na ibibigay sa iyo. Pero sinasabi ko sa inyo, dapat maging realistic kayo sa paggawa nito at wag namang ang nakalagay lang honorarium to myself dahil baka yun ang maging reason kung ba't hindi i-approve ng committee ang iyong no? So while we're saying that this is really up to you, no? You have to use this as a way to plan because you are going to have expenses. You're going to spend money. And so use this as a tool to prepare for such. No? Number 10, sino-sino ang magsasagawa ng pag-aaral? Ibigay ang mga pangalan ng research team, sino ang lead researcher at mga katulong niya at anong mga gagawin nila. Ilakip ang maikling talambuhay, magbigay ng detalye ng kanilang karanasan sa paggawa ng research at kung sila ay nagtatrabaho sa isang institusyon, ibigay ang detalye nito. Ang qualification, remember, kung organization, kailangan may track record na ng at least isang completed research. No, it may not be the organization, but the lead researcher has to have completed a research already and disseminated the results of the research. Number 11, kung isang organisasyon ang proponent, ibigay ang detalye ng pangangasiwa ng proyekto. So this is your management plan. So yun yung 11 items na kailangan sagutan. At ang pinakahuli dito is a declaration of ethical conduct of research. So pwede nyo ilagay ito sa ibang form, pwede din dito sa form na ito pagkatapos lagdaan, no? So this is a declaration that is actually a request for exception in the ethics review. Kasi kung halimbawa thesis or dissertation, ini-ethics review na yan sa university ninyo, hindi ba? Hindi ka naman makakapag-defend kung hindi pa siya na-review ang ethics, no? So, papapirmahan lang ito at saka isa-submit together with the application, no? So, pinatutunayan ko ang pag-aaral na ito ay isinalang na sa pagsusuri ukol sa angkop at responsableng pagsasagawa ng pag-aaral o pananaliksik, no? So kung wala pa, yun ang kailangang tingnan ng TWG at mag-undergo ng ethics review. Okay, so sana ay naintindihan naman ako dito sa discussion natin ngayon. At ngayon, pupunta na tayo sa workshop. Sige, siguro just 10 minutes for question. No, 10 minutes. Sige, 10 minutes for Q&A for Fernie.
Okay, ma'am. We actually have 2 questions. Well, one is simply asking if she can have a copy of the NCCA requirements for the research grant or the link. I think you answered that already earlier.
Yes.
Such details will be included in the handout to be given to the participants, which will be sent to you through your email. We have 2 questions from Jan Kaime. And the question is, does the NCCA also give research grants for science-based heritage research? And the next one is, can we add honorarium for my collaborators in the budget?
The answer to the question, I think, is yes. Now, for both questions, a science-based research on heritage, yes, definitely. Now, I should tell you that uh, kasi ngayon hindi na siya available. I was trying to look for it on the site, but I could not see it. But before, I used to look at the record of approved projects, no, at the NCCA, and I tell you, more than 50% of the funds of the NCCA go to conservation projects, no, go to heritage projects, no, big infrastructure projects, no, and also definitely there are many science-based projects that are supported by the NCCA in relation to heritage. And what's the other question? Honorarium for collaborators? Yes, yes. Oo naman. But of course, since the fund is just that, mini, tiny, so nasa inyo na po kung papaano ninyo pagkakasyahin yung inyong ano. But there's also a possibility for another funding, I think, to be, I think the NCCA, I have to take this, I have to verify this. Pero tingin ko ang aking position dyan, if there is another funding body that will support your project, no, okay lang, lalo na kung malaking proyekto yan. But you'll have to just be clear about what NCCA will be funding in your research. Ganun siguro ang tamang sagot doon.
Are there any more questions? To the members of the audience, you may raise your hand or you may type your question in the chat box or the Q&A box.
Kung wala na, baka wala na, kailangan sila naman salita. Okay, ganito ang suggestion ko ang gagawin natin. Have you heard of Slack? Teka lang ha. Hindi ko makita yung ad. Fernie, if I post this sa chat box, is it going to be seen by everybody?
For the chat box, it depends. If it's for all the panelists and attendees, then everyone in Zoom will see.
How do those who are not panelists get it?
I'm sorry.
They will not get it?
You can send the link through the chat box.
All right. So, ano ba yan?
You can cut and paste.
Panelists and attendees. All
That's
right.
correct. Yes.
Okay. Panelists and attendees. Okay. So, nag-post po ako ng link. Would you please try to click the link, but please do not go out of Zoom, no? Do not go out of Zoom. In other words, wag kayong mag-leave ng Zoom. But if you click this in your browser, you'll be taken to Slack. And the invitation is for you to join Slack and to be part of the discussions in Slack. Mag-share screen ako so that you can see it. Nakakita nyo? So this is the Slack account. And on the left-hand side, itong inano ng aking cursor are channels, no? So anyone can join any of the channels. I created channels which are named according to the classification of intangible cultural heritage. If you would like to participate, ayan, pumapasok na si Man. Dito na si Marie, andito na si Paul. Pwede kayong pumili ng isa sa mga yan. Pwede din tangible heritage. Kung ang inyong research interest ay mas sa tangible heritage, doon kayo pumasok. No? Pero ang maganda rito, you can talk to each other, you can have a thread of conversation amongst yourselves. I'm not giving any guidelines kung paano gagawin. But perhaps you can use the proposal form to start talking about possible projects that you can either individually do or you would like to collaborate with other people. So, ang maganda rito, kung gusto nyo makita yung usapan ng iba pang mga tao, you can go join another channel. No? So, open sa lahat ito and you can go from one channel to another if you like. However, of course, mas maganda kung ma-sustain din ninyo ang discussion amongst yourselves within a channel so that you can come up with something. So, what might be a good research project is probably the focus question that I'd like to pose. And how might that work? Ano kaya ang focus ng ano? You please use the research proposal form. I've posted the research proposal form here. You can look at general, and then in the file section, you can see that I posted the PowerPoint in PDF format, the research proposal form of NCCA, and also the PowerPoint on the NCCA research program. So those are your materials, and you can use them in your discussion. Now, so let's have about 13 minutes of discussion. It's 3:32 now, so at 4 o'clock we can come back and we'll have 30 minutes of big group sharing. Now you can decide amongst yourselves who would share during the big group session, and we'll take it from there. All right. So at this point, let's please work on Slack. But remember, again, don't leave Zoom so you can easily go back because we don't have a breakout session kasi. So go into this, work for 30 minutes, and then come back into Zoom after 30 minutes. All right? Can I get a response?
Okay, ma'am.
Great. Otherwise, hindi workshop ito. Guys, parang messenger lang din ito. So hindi siya komplikado. So sige lang kayo.
Dr. Jazz, nag-hello na ako sa traditional craftsmanship. Walang sumasagot.
Wala sumasagot.
Mary
Oo
Ann
nga,
yata
nakita ko
nasa-
nga, nag-hello pa. Wala
Saan ka dyan? But, sorry ah.
Traditional craftsmanship.
Okay. Hindi ko nga, teka, I'm a little bit lost eh. Sorry.
Nag-hello ako, walang sumasagot.
I'm a little bit lost.
Kasi nga, hindi tayo pwedeng mag-usap na dito kasi general ito, unless yun na lang ang gustong gawin, no? Ito kasi at least people will have a chance to meet other people.
Saan kayo? Hindi ko kayo makita.
Actually, Shirley, nasa
Ayan,
oral tradition na kanina nakita
traditional
kita.
craftsmanship.
Ano i-click ko? Sorry. I'm lost. I'm a little bit lost. Traditional classroom. I-click ko lang?
I-click mo lang. Tapos makakapunta ka dun sa channel na yon. Nakita mo? Ayan o.
Yeah, pero ba't walang tao? Ano nakikita ko?
Nakita mo may thread. Nandyan si John Eremil Teodoro.
Yes, I saw. Ganun. Akala ko Zoom kind of thing. Sorry.
It's not Zoom. Actually, it has a Zoom-like characteristic. Kaya lang ito. So, hindi tayo pwedeng mag-usap na gaya ng sa Zoom.
So parang chat box format siya. Sorry. Kaya pala taka ako. Sabi ko, ba't hindi ko kayong makita? I thought it was a Zoom kind of thing. Sorry.
So tatlo na
okay, sige.
kayo.
Yeah, I'm in actually.
Si Lona, si Mary Ann Macaranas, at si John Eremil Teodoro. Ayan, mag-usap na kayo.
Oo.
Meron din sa oral traditions. Si Marie Andre Palion. Hello. Wala ka pang kasama.
Teka.
Pero ang maganda nito, Shirley, kasi if they want to continue the discussion even beyond the conference, they can continue doing so.
I see.
Hindi ko i-delete itong account na ito para diretso pang mag-usap yung mga tao. And if they want to create their own account, then they can do so.
Okay.
And if you want to get the files that I said I already uploaded, you
dun sa Slack.
Sa Slack, you please click General and all of the files are there.
Okay. Andali lang.
Anyway, we'll try this out for 30 minutes. Let's see what happens. If nothing happens, then that's okay. It's a way to also have a break. Ayan, Marie Andre. Nandiyan na si Dr. Lua. Doc Arnie, saan ka sumama?
Wala eh. Wala sa choices eh.
Ay, ganun.
Saan si Dr. Hindi kasi dapat Dr. Arnie, Dr. Arnie, tayo should be forming one group. As in tayo. You,
Pwede
me,
kayo.
John Eremil, Vic, and then sino ba yun?
Gawan
Fernie,
ko
and
kayo. Gawan ko kayo.
dapat isang group tayo kasi di ba we're supposed to do a proposal.
Ito na, Shirley. Gagawan ko kayo ng ano. Anong gusto niyong pangalan ng group?
RPW na lang.
RPW.
Oh, yun ano namin. Dapat isang group kami. Mag-uusap kami ng isa. Oo.
Ayan. Sige. Gagawan ko.
Sige.
RPW. Anong RPW team? Ganon?
Or DLSU RPW team.
Sige. Pwede rin kayo mag-create ng channel nyo. Pero sige, i-create ko na kayo. Create.
So, ano gagawin namin? Join?
Oo, sure. Lalagay ko na.
Sige.
Ayan,
Shirley, Fernie, Arnie, Jan.
Teka, ano nang Arnulfo? Jan. Sino pa? Fernie. Kasama ba si Fernie?
Yes, kasama si Fernie. Sino pa nandyan? Sa RPW team. Nandyan si Victor, wala. Wala si Victor,
Wala si Jaden.
Oo. So, dapat isang team tayo.
Oo.
Ayan na. Ginawa
Ayan
ko na
na.
kayo.
Okay, is Courtney going to join us also? Is Courtney here?
Pindutin lang, di ba? Diyan ka na kaagad.
Oo.
Okay. So, dapat kasama tayo dito. Fernie. But this is type, lang siya.
Yes.
We'll just have to type. We cannot see each other. Ayun. Akala ko we can see each other. Kaya nahilo ako.
Works like messenger, surely. Pero yung paid nito, pwedeng pwedeng mag-conference. Yung paid version, libre kasi ito eh.
Bakit hindi ko ma-type yun I'm in, di ba? But I cannot type the message.
Bakit?
Hindi ko alam eh. But I'm in, right? I'm inside, di ba? I'm already inside, but I cannot type.
Ay, bakit?
Hindi ko alam eh. Ayaw mag-type. Ba't kaya?
Nasa box ka ba?
Okay lang. Mag-zoom na lang kami. Mag-zoom na lang kami ni Fernie.
Nasa box ka ba?
I can't get in. Ayaw mag-type eh. I don't know why.
Pero surely nakita mo yung hello namin ni Fernie.
Nakita ko yung hello ninyo ni Fernie, but I cannot type. Type ko, ayaw mag. Oo, yun. Nakita ko yun. Bakit di ka makatype? Di ako makatype. Ayaw eh. Why?
Try mo nga dyan.
Why can I not type? Ayaw mag-type sa akin. Nakikita ko yung box natin. Nakikita ko yun, hola, hello, tsaka bakit di ka makatype. Nababasa ko, but I can't.
Sa Zoom ka nag-ano.
Ha?
Dapat pumunta ka sa Slack, hindi sa Zoom.
Wait. Pero nakikita ko yung Zoom.
Oo, kasi nakashare ako eh.
Teka, wait. Let
Kailangan
me try again.
Mismong Slack. I can hear you naman say, di ako makatype.
Ano ba yan? Yeah, found it. Okay.
You're trying to type on Zoom.
Sorry. Found you guys. Lo, Teki. Ako, Engot. Okay.
Sige, kung wala pang masyadong conversations na mangyayari today, pwede naman itong ipagpatuloy. Sabihin na natin, launch na lang ito. Kasi people can continue using it. I'll have it on always para magamit. Wala. Some conversations going on. Si Marie, si Paul, si Annalisa are in tangible heritage. Flopper, flopper. Shirley, alam ko na kung anong project niyo na gusto kong i-suggest. Guys, 1 minute to end of our workshop, breakout. Bernie?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes. Let's say it's 4 o'clock, so we have 30 minutes to have some kind of open discussion na lang siguro. Or would you like to help me facilitate it? Let's invite people back into Zoom. So anybody would like to share what you have discussed? If you did discuss anything with anyone in our modified breakout session, also known as break. And maybe it's a good thing to also ask the RPW, the members of the RPW, about next plans they have after the conference. So there's a question posted on the, ito na yung question ni Emerald. Are you going to receive a copy of the presentation? Emerald, it's already available on the Slack. Go to general and you get all of the documents, no? The audience daw can't speak unless allowed. Oo nga, no? Ganito na lang, let's invite the members of the RPW to do some kind of sharing of their experience. Not necessarily in this workshop, but in the last 2 days. Silence. Jan Eremil.
Yes, Dr. Llana.
Recitation na lang tayo.
Yeah, I don't know. Siguro allowed naman ako ng co-members sa RPW team, no, to share what we have discussed a while ago, no, sa Slack. So, after much difficulty of using Slack, we were able to discuss something, no? Yeah, because we were thinking of proposing a project, no, for the Salle Hall, no. So this year we are celebrating the the 100th year of Salle Hall. Such an iconic building of the Salle University, no, that makikita from Taft Avenue, no, and actually it's included in a book called 1001 buildings, no, in the world that you have to see before you die, no. So that's so important. So and of course, because we are required to be interdisciplinary in our proposal, and indeed, no, the member of the RPW team are from the different fields. So we're thinking of creating an online museum, no, a virtual museum, no, about the Salle building. So history, because we have historians so in the group, like Fernie. So history, and then because Shirley and I are from the literature department, so may siguro personal stories, narratives, poetry, and perhaps we can also ask painters, and or to look for paintings, of the LaSalle Hall, and maybe old photographs, so to be put inside the virtual museum, and because we have Dr. Arne Escaraga with us, and sa computer naman siya. So it's virtual, so we're thinking of QR codes, for na pag i-click mo yun, you can be led to a virtual tour, of the of the building, and so
So
yun.
primarily it's a project that can be classified under tangible because we're talking about the object of research
Tangible.
as a building, right?
Mhm.
But what do you think? What do you think? I mean, to you and to the members of the TW of the RPW, how do you think you can use what I was talking about
Mhm.
uh, critical heritage studies paradigm of the take into consideration takes into consideration the performative nature of heritage. For example, you can think of the building as something that performs, no, because it's not just a still object. No, it has, as already pointed out by Fernie in his discussion. No, it has changed. It has been moving in a way, no, through the years, no, in the 100 years that it has existed, and of course the significance of the building. I would say it's not only its design, but how it has been alive, in the life and memory of people who have used the building. Correct. So paano kaya yan ita-translate into the research project?
That is
That's the
something
approach, di ba?
that's something that we have yet to discuss. Consideration is who is this for? Because if we expect the general public to access this information, then we cannot use jargon and other scholarly standards. Okay, because well, it will just not be understandable. So we have to determine, well, first how we can preserve the scholarly value, yet at the same time make it accessible to the general public. Because I think at the moment the output will be a website. Okay, so if not a coffee table book, the alternative is a website. So we can't make it like a scholarly output in our, in our based on our standards within the university.
Wow, very exciting. And with Doc Arnie's AI, no, AR, augmented reality components, if there would be something like that, that would be really exciting. You can do a tour of the building and you can do a tour of uh, its history via objects that would stand for certain periods. So na-excite na ako, hindi naman ako bahagi ng
Yeah,
RPW.
or maybe a short film, for example, a short film on the dramatization, of the massacre, that happened during the Japanese occupation, in the building. So yeah, we can involve siguro some
Yeah, pwede
mga
yun as part of the
filmmaker,
narratives of the building. No? Oo.
yeah, short film.
Yes, kasama yung massacre. Yes.
Oh,
And
make it
all the ghost
synchronic.
stories.
Correct, oo.
Ako ay
Sige, Doc Arnie.
Yeah, well, since brainstorming pa lang naman tayo, I'm interested, and this is true for anybody, whether you're in Batangas, in Iloilo, or I see that we are from all over the country anyway. This notion of involving the crowd. I've been repeating this. This must be the fifth time I'm saying this.
Yeah,
Yung
that's
involving the
exciting.
crowd for curating something or for bringing information in, so that it's what happened to film, what happened to food, what happened to literature, what happened to songs, right? Na dati you have to go through labels and publishers and producers to get your creative works out. Now the whole process is cut short, and that is where I thought the scholarly thing might come in. It's not the product, but if we can study the effect on the crowd, on how more empowered they feel, or how much better they embrace the culture or the artifact, or how much better they appreciate the, whether it's a building or a park that you're talking about. So the idea I had described earlier over Slack was to have a like a virtual shell of the building or of the campus, and people who have distinct memories of a corner there, of the chapel, of a specific classroom, or of some statue, could pin a poem or a note or maybe a picture 10 years ago that they took at that specific point and pin it there. And the whole thing becomes a collective documentation of the crowd. And this could be students, teachers, or if it were all the Mandaluyong people or all the Negrenses, depending on what we are going to tackle as a, like a community or a crowd. So I thought that the scholarly output, if we want to cast it as something of a research form or a scholarly form, would be documenting that, like what happened to their reaction, to how they used to interact with the thing, and now that it's done this way, what has changed and stuff like this. I don't know if that merits anything scholarly.
Oh, maganda yun,
Fun.
Dr. Arnie. Yes, yes, yes.
Oo naman, exciting. Pwede bang makisawsaw dyan sa project niyo?
Performance aspect, di ba? Pwedeng, ano.
Yeah,
Ano yung
exciting.
ibang groups, no? Oo, they also
Pero
share.
ito kasi itong merging of or blurring of the distinction between the tangible and the intangible is something that's really challenging, but at the same time very exciting, because then it comes alive. It really comes alive. It's not just one dead object, that sits there and invites you to comment on it. No, but there is interaction. It is something that is alive in the life of people who have had an experience of it, di ba? So napakaganda. Ito yung mga pinag-uusapan nyo kahapon pa ng mga moments, ng mga instances na where things are not just still, no, but active. How about the others? Would you like see Marie? Marie, would you like to say something about the LOAS that you want to investigate, the ones you're collecting in Iloilo? Marie, yes.
Please unmute.
Hello po.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Iloilo. I've had this study when I was in college about the luwas of Iloilo. So that is only a short undergraduate thesis, but I'm trying to go on province-wide. So I'm thinking of the problem on the psyche of each selected municipalities, if they have the same oral tradition, such as the luwas. So I'm trying to see their psyche behind it, if it affects the financial status of individual respondents. So that's it. And I hope I'll be successful on that as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
San yung dati mo nang ginawa, san siya? Iloilo City.
Oo. Yes po.
And then you want to go province-wide. Wow.
Yes po.
Or Dr.
Exciting
Jazz,
yan. Yes, John, please.
I have a suggestion to Marie, no? Kasi
Andre po. Just call me Andre.
Hi, Andre.
Andre.
For the LOA kasi, no, actually, when I was in San Agustin, we published this book, no, by Amorita Rabuco. It's called Folk Poetry, the LOA, no. So, yeah, I think it's a high time, no, that a follow-up study on the LOA should be made. And I suggest it should be the whole of Panay, no, kasi here Dr. Rabuco only gathered, no, the things that she gathered in the city, saka sa town nila, no, but I want to see a study on the LOA, no, that would really Panay wide. So tingnan natin, baka may LOA in Aklanon, in Kinaraya, in Hiligaynon.
Yes, that's why I'm collecting LOAs because each town, or maybe I'm not sure yet, different wordings, but I think the same, I don't know, the same thought but different.
Okay lang yun. Oh, yun, mahalaga yun kasi ang ayon kay Arsenio Manuel, di ba, ang isang folk lit dapat may several versions, no, like may mag-gather of time. So that's okay because yung kay Amorita Rabuco kasi she concentrated on the form, yung describe na yung form, and I think tingnan din natin dapat yung sociolinguistic aspect, no, ng LOA. Yeah, bongga yan. Gawin mo.
Magandang insight yung sinabi ni Ma'am Jazmin, yung kung ano yung ano natin, yung anong pagkaiba-iba.
Yeah.
Yan lang po.
Thank
you po thank you po sa sa workshop na ito. Marami akong nakuha kay Ma'am Jazmin kanina.
Oo, salamat naman, Andre. Anong institution mo? Nagtuturo ka ba?
Yes po, I'm with Sacred Heart Academy, tapos I'm with Kultura as well.
Ay, yeah, ikaw pala kanina yung nag-message sa akin, no, Andre? Sorry.
Yes po.
Yeah, sorry.
Teacher po ako sa social science. Araling Panlipunan.
I see. Ang galing.
And
marami kang
also
pagdadaan ng mga natutunan mo dito.
Yes po. I-apply ko sa mga students ko. Umuulan dito sa Iloilo. Pasensya na po.
Okay. Meron pa po ba? Maraming salamat, Andre. Meron pa
You're welcome po.
Mag-share? Pagod na kayo. Gusto niyo nang tapusin ang ating session. Okay. So, kung wala na, ang final words na lang natin, sana ay kumbaga nagsilbing synthesis in a way yung ating discussion ngayon at yung ating session ngayong hapon. In a way baka, kasi that was what I intended, no, as a kind of prompt in order to kind of put together many of the things that we heard, no, in the discussion from the first session yesterday to the last session today, no, this morning. Sana kung in a way nag-gel yon, and you can make out something that you can use for your own work and make a plan for yourself and for your collaborators, if you have collaborators where you are or in what institution you're working. And do please email us via the address of this conference if you need any help at all. And we are on social media also. You can also reach out to us in case you need help. No, I am not with NCCA Research Committee, the technical working group anymore, so I will not be able to help you along that line. But if you need to have any clarifications on what we discussed about the NCCA research program, I can help you on that matter. Maraming salamat po. And with that, God bless to all of you. Fernie, I turn it over to you now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jazmin Llana. And now we shall proceed to the synthesis to be given by, I'm sorry, by Ms. Chris Barbara Pe. Ms. Pe?
Hello. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Just give me a moment. So during this conference workshop, Rethinking Heritage and Heritage Futures, the different panel sessions have dazzled us with an array of ideas on heritage and its futures. Let us revisit the key concerns in the 4 panel sessions, which are heritage cities, heritage LaSalle, heritage futures, and heritage research. The panel on heritage cities focuses on locale as a heritage. From an observer's field notes, the Burnham plans in Chicago and Manila are re-examined in the contemporary context, looking at climate change and small acts that can stem it. For instance, restoring waterways for recreation. There's also the reappraisal of the Burnham plan for Manila, which was a turning point in the city's evolution, and the proposed Daniel H. Burnham Memorial Plaza to honor his legacy. In Cebu City, there is a curious case of private owners and developers who offered to fund the preservation of heritage sites that their property is sitting on, a model for owners or developers elsewhere. When it comes to making heritage buildings accessible to the disabled and elderly, a key question arises. Does the importance of conservation take precedence over the importance of accessibility? Apparently, reasonable adjustments can be made. For Heritage LaSalle, which celebrates the centenary of St. LaSalle Hall, it looks into the tangible and intangible heritage of Salle University as an institution. The panel picked the minds of audience members with the following: the construct of Lasallian identity and heritage, such as the last light versus Lasallian question, the shaping influence of 100 years of liberal education in the holistic development of Lasallian students, the institution's practical orientation toward work, shifting the focus from career to vocation, and how an archivist's work in the second largest office in LaSalle Green Hills can yield great finds among Lasallian brothers' documents and artifacts. These contribute not only to Lasallian cultural heritage, but to national heritage as well. Think NAMFRO scoring board during the Marcos Cory elections. The panel on heritage futures lives up to its name, starting with the recuperation of Spanish period plazas across the Philippines to provide public spaces, especially during the pandemic. From the perspective of a heritage manager, valorizing new meanings will help the survival of heritage. From the field of science, on the other hand, nanotechnology is used to help preserve stone and metal in sculptures. Finally, new horizons open up when generative artificial intelligence can help preserve local art. The last panel considers possibilities of heritage research in the 21st century. For architectural heritage and conservation, significance as a methodology rather than just a concept is broached. Architectural facades in Maasin Leyte, on the other hand, become an interesting point of study to chart the effect of moral raids in their design and orientation. Apart from architecture, cultural heritage in the forms of food and film also yield new insights. Food history, for one, is proposed as a model for inner transformation and social well-being, while film heritage can embrace both traditional films and alternative films for a more enduring heritage, especially during the pandemic. These ideas and more lead us to truly rethink heritage and its futures. Thank you and good afternoon.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Barbara Pe. And now, for the closing remarks, I'd like to invite Dr. Shirley Lua, the team leader of the DLSU Research Productivity Workshop on Heritage Research. Dr. Lua.
All right, good afternoon to everybody. This is more like an acknowledgement, okay? So we thank you, first of all, to all the panelists, the resource persons, our workshop facilitator and lecturer, Dr. Jazmin Llana, and all the others who have been here with us. We appreciate their time, their effort, and the light of their wisdom in blessing us with all with all those decades of experience, okay? So they are our models to follow, okay? We emulate their ideas, we emulate their professional experience in these areas. And we hope that for those who are here for the first time, and this is like your baptism into heritage, we hope that this conference has somehow excited you, okay, and you have this passion, okay, a heart of passion to explore heritage, and also as we as we often say, para sa bayan, okay, something like that, no? So, and we'd like to thank you also for all the participants, okay, your input, your sharing, okay, even your questions, okay, are very important to help us understand better our own culture, tradition, our own heritage. So thank you very much for being here with us. And on behalf of De La Salle University, especially our research program workshop heritage team, composing of Dr. Fernando Santiago, myself, Dr. Arnie Ascaraga, Dr. John Irmil Teodoro, Jose Victor Torres, okay. Who else is on our team? Jay Calieja, Dr. Yumum Demeterio. Thank you very much, okay, for these 2 wonderful days, okay. Well, we hope to have more of this, okay, in the future, more conversations like this in the future. And we hope that you can actively participate, no? Actively participate, no? In this kind of conversation. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Okay, I will say class this